Yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. Uh, this is On the Road, Navigating Legal Issues in Concert Touring, hosted by the Arts and Business Council of Greater Nashville, Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts, and the Entertainment and Sports Law section of the Austin Bar Association. For those of you I haven't met yet, I'm Kate Formway, and I coordinate the Volunteer Lawyers and Professionals for the Arts program and run the volunteer program here at the Arts and Business Council of Greater Nashville. We are a local independent nonprofit dedicated to uniting the resources of the arts and business communities, whether it's through education, professional resources, or connecting creatives with the business world. Our goal is to ensure a thriving, sustainable creative culture in Nashville. When you become a member of the Arts and Business Council, you're joining a network of artists, arts organizations, and local businesses all working to cultivate the creative community. You can learn more and sign up at abcnashville.org/membership. And helping to make this webinar possible is Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts. TALA serves the state of Texas and provides pro bono assistance from lawyers and accountants to artists, inventors, and small nonprofit arts organizations, along with public educational programs tailored to the artistic community. You can learn more about their programs, services, and membership at talaarts.org. And now I am excited to introduce our guests. So moderating today's panel is Heather Liberman VanDyke, founder of Javelina Legal, adjunct professor at the University of Texas School of Law, and chair of the Entertainment and Sports Law section of the Austin Bar Association. Next, I would like to introduce Brendon Anthony, Vice President of Big Loud Texas, an Austin-based industry veteran. Brendon oversees Texas operation across label functions for Big Loud. Also providing expertise today is Denise Shackelford, founder of the Primacy firm and associate professor at Middle Tennessee State University. And finally, let's welcome Graham Williams, CEO and executive of talent buying at Resound, a live music and entertainment promoter out of Austin, Texas.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Kate, for making this happen, and Elisa as well. It's kind of a vision that we've been cooking up for several months, and it's such a joy to bring together the communities of Austin music attorneys and musicians and Nashville attorneys and musicians as well. So hopefully there's a lot of rich information here today. We are going to save time for questions at the end, but feel free to pose them in the chat throughout. And to the extent we notice them or can weigh in as we go, we certainly will. So don't be shy about that. Um, yeah, in light of the time, I'm just gonna get cracking. So I'd love to start this conversation about touring with focusing on what the booking process actually looks like. And so, Graham, if you're down for giving us some insights, as a talent buyer, what are some of the things that you think about when you are selecting talent? What does the offer process look like? What are the deal terms that are kind of the most important to you at that stage? And what does a negotiation kick off like from your perspective?
Yeah, for sure. Um, Essentially, I think most people assume that talent buying is us picking bands we want to book or us listening to certain acts. Things pop up on Spotify, you want to check them out, you reach out, you see if they're available. Sometimes that happens more so maybe on a festival. But 9 out of 10 times or more, we're getting hit up by booking agents who are routing tours. So we handle a number of venues in Texas. We do 600 shows a year. So people are hitting us up, managers, mostly booking agents who are routing tours. They're asking us for holds on our calendar. Let's say what's available November 13th through 20th, and we will put holds on the calendar based on availability. Then that agent will come back and start negotiating what's a fair price. They then want an offer. My team will discuss internally what we think the band is worth. Sometimes they'll give us guidelines. They'll say this band is worth 20 grand. We need X amount of dollars for support, and this is the ticket price we're shooting for. We want to keep it, under $40. So it's a $35 ticket. And we'll draft up an offer based on that if we think it's worth it. If we don't, we lost money last time. Maybe the band's new record got pushed back and we're not as confident it's going to get the press it needs. We may want to offer something a bit lower. And then we'll send an offer. That agent is usually taking our offer and internally discussing it, sharing it with management. And more often than not, if you're in a competitive town like Austin, they are comparing it with other offers. They're taking offers from other similar venues, similar promoters, and doing a side by side, saying this band, this particular venue is willing to pay more money, but it's not the best venue for this artist. It's not the place we'd like them to play, but they are offering more money, or vice versa. And they'll kind of back and forth and come back to you. Usually, in our case, based on the rooms we book and the kind of stuff we do, we're usually going to get that show, but sometimes we don't. Or sometimes we have to counter offer if we think it's worth it. And that's kind of where the debate comes in. We then have to decide if the band is saying they need more money to confirm it, and we just aren't confident that it's going to do the numbers, we have to be willing to pass or stick to our guns and stay the course and see if they are willing to still confirm with us. Or sometimes that artist is worth taking a chance on, and we think they're moving up in the world. They're selling more tickets than they used to. We really like the new music they're putting out. We think it's going to move the needle 6 months from now, and we come up on the money. But usually that's the process. There's a little back and forth. I'd say about half the time, though, around what they're looking for is around what we're willing to pay. I think most agents, they're trying to get it done. They have to book 30 dates on a tour. They don't want to spend hours and hours going back and forth with every single agent in every single market. They know about what the band's going to draw. They know about what they need to make it financially feasible to do the tour, and that's what they're going to ask for. And they know that most promoters who know what they're doing are going to have a threshold that they're willing to hit. So usually it gets done a bit quicker than that. But yeah, that's kind of the process. We go back and forth and either quickly come to agreement or don't. If they want the date and they want to work with us versus someone else, they'll challenge the date, which means if they're holding the calendar and someone is holding in front of them, we then have to tell the agent or two in front of them that we have a challenge. You have 24 hours to clear the date or confirm. Usually, if you're holding a lot of dates, you're willing to let a date go because you're not ready to confirm a date, in which case the hold behind them gets to move forward in the process and eventually lock in that particular date at that particular venue. And then from there, the process gets handed off to the marketing department. We give them all the announced details. They build the art, they build the assets, they start building the ads, and it goes on sale online. And the next 3, 4 months is them doing their job until the night of the show.
Awesome. That's super helpful to kind of lay the framework. And I guess I'm curious, Denise, from your perspective, given that you've worked so many years in the weeds on the management side, what can you provide in terms of more of like what the artist perspective might be in the process as well?
Well, a couple of things, but I totally agree with Graham's comment about most of it's going to occur through the booking agency. Um, if the artist has a booking agency, obviously, if they don't, it would be the manager or the artist himself. But we are looking at things like radius clauses. Of course, we're looking at fees, and it's not always just the guarantee, it's the splits, and it can be a plus or a versus which means you get the guarantee plus a certain percentage, or you get the guarantee and or a certain percentage, whichever's greater. We want to make sure tickets are priced at the appropriate price for our audience and for the market. You don't want underprice, but you don't want to overprice either. You're going to not have a good turnout. We want to see what merch splits are, things of that nature. Most venues take a percentage of merch, and so it's very common. And unless, you just pay it most of the time. I've never really seen it where we didn't pay something. The kind of key factor is, especially when you're talking big tours, is getting the having the personnel from the venue to help, because you want to usually set up multiple merch stands. And so having the venue staff it, I think that kind of helps at least emotionally offset why you're giving up part of your merch prof. So yeah, that's kind of some of the main things.
Okay.
I will say, let me add one more thing. Sorry. Again, when as an attorney, I don't do a lot of negotiating on booking agreements. When I was sitting in the management office, the booking agency negotiates that with the buyer, and then they send it over to the management office to review. The manager talks to the artist. Do they accept a date? Do they not accept a date? Graham also alluded to this: is the right room to play? All of those sorts of things come into the equation. So I don't get real involved in that, but if you are an independent artist and you're doing it yourself or your manager's doing it, then looking at those radius clauses, those house fees and so forth.
So Denise, how often then, once the agent passes the manager the terms, does the manager push back and say, sorry, we're not interested? Or is it kind of too late at that point?
No, it's not absolutely not too late. Um, I mean, because you get so many offers, kind of like all the holds Graham was talking about. But no, is it again, the right venue, the right date, the right money? Does it route? All of those things have to come in. And so you may be getting an offer. And then you also may have the artist just have a conflict, a personal conflict that they don't, they want to block that off and they don't want to take it. So no, we can go back and either say that date doesn't work for us, or we can't even consider it, or you know what, that's too low. We can't, it doesn't make sense. Or if it's a fly date, if we're not able to bus, and we've got a rent back line when you get into a market, then you need additional compensation to offset that if you have to fly and you can't bus. So.
Okay. And so for Brendon, from the label side, how and when do you get involved in this process?
Well, thank you guys, and it's an honor to be here with you. And I'm really pleased to be speaking alongside such sharp people today. I'll try to hold my own. The label functions as kind of, if you think about us as kind of strategic venture capital in a way, we are very connected with the agents in this process, in the booking process. We're very connected with management in the booking process, but we do that because we need to be able to promote these releases that we've helped these artists create. So at the very outset of tour booking, we will get all the label holds, all the agency holds rather, and we'll have a fairly good idea of what that artist's 6 months looks like, or 3 months, or however long they're booking out. And at certain points, we will raise our hand and sit with a artist and a manager and an agent and say, hey, look, we don't think that for the music we've helped this artist create that we're aiming at the right audience. We're going through one right now with an artist that is booking for finance more than booking for strategic audience building. And, that can be a real issue. The artist needs to protect their bottom line. They need to go play shows that have guaranteed money attached 100%. And we're supportive of that. But if we don't see that those shows are long-term building the audience that artist needs to continue to release these things on this upward trending line that we want to help them build, we have to raise our hand and say so. So we do get involved 100%. We're not hands off. We're not laissez-faire about it. But we do want the agents to do their job, and we want to let them do their job well. We want management to make the decisions they think are right for the artist, but we do raise our hand and say from time to time, we don't think we're aiming at the right audience here, and we think it's time to probably reposition them that means different rooms, that means different opening slots. And, you know, we do say occasionally, like, this may not be a money play at the beginning of this process, but we have to build this artist's audience. So there's our friction. We got to figure it out. Strategically, we look at agencies' work as a way to shape an artist's tour year. So we want them out supporting the material we've helped them create. And we look for holds and holes in the schedule where we might raise our hand and say, hey, this is probably a good time to set up a lot of writing dates for you in these holes. What do you got going on? Are you having a baby, or do you want to stay off the grid completely? Or can you work during those times towards making the next record? And then where is that hole? When are we going to slot in times for recording this next project, which we need to anticipate at least 6 to 8 months out? So we look at agency, we look at holds, we look at touring, we look at how the artist shapes their audience and their bottom line, and we slot in times to help them create along the way.
It's fascinating to hear you speak about like the financial versus audience building piece and the creative strategy there. And I guess I wonder, because you are also a touring musician yourself, how, or formerly. Okay.
Yeah.
Formerly, how that kind of creative version, like the audience building piece versus financial piece may have come into the equation when you thought about touring as a creative.
Yeah, I was really, really grateful for my touring career, which lasted almost 20 years. I loved it. It was one of the best, most fun parts of my career so far. I stopped doing that in earnest in 2010, but here I am on the road again with a band. We're playing with Lord Huron and Mumford and Sons over the next several weeks. I am getting pulled off the bench just to play 5 shows to help one of the opening bands. That's great. I'm happy to do that. I remember as an artist being excited about growing our audience and really enjoying the participating and growing the audience. And I was very hypersensitive to rooms where we'd find ourselves not playing for the audience we were trying to grow. That's just a fact. You know it as a person playing on stage when you look out in the crowd and know that you may be opening, but you're opening for a crowd that you may be headlining for at some point. But there are soft ticket dates that come up that are good money that you're just playing to play. And, you know, with all due respects, like sometimes in the country world, going to play the county fair may not be growing your audience if you're not shooting for radio. If you are, you need to go do those things. It's a demoralizing thing for an artist to play in front of a crowd that is not receptive or does not have the prospect of being receptive in the future. And you're doing it because you got, a payday for it. That being said, we all have played very lucrative private shows when the crowd may or may not be completely interested that you're there, but you do it to pad the bottom line for the rest of the stuff you're trying to do. And as a developing artist, all of those things add up, and you have to keep that in mind. But just from a human perspective, standing in front of a crowd that doesn't want anything to do with you is just part of the job, and it's a tough part of the job,
I used to, an artist I worked with, just to tag on to that, used to say, if it's going to be a goat roping, tell me it's a goat roping.
Don't let me find out on my
show
own.
up there and not realize what it is. But you're right. Some of them are just the money. Fairs and festivals notoriously are big money dates, but not fun plays. People want to get their cotton candy and hot dogs, and you're there.
You said it. It's a funnel cake festival, and that's fine too.
Oh, so the more the artist plays, the more they get paid. And yet, we have radius clauses baked into these agreements to help protect the market. And so maybe, Graham, could you weigh in a little bit on the importance of radius clauses in the work you do and what they typically look like, and maybe any pushback you get depending on the type of show you're booking?
Yeah. So as far as radius clauses, it sort of depends. I'm I'm not super strict about it, depending on the act in Austin. If it's a festival, I think it makes more sense. Artists typically are getting paid a lot more on festivals, particularly the top half of that poster. When you look at a festival, those headliners, Charlie XCX hopefully isn't playing in town 30 days later for half the price, or else no one will go to the first one. So I get why festivals are a lot stricter about it. Opening smaller bands, there's a little bit more wiggle room. For touring artists, our typical radius is pretty simple. If we book a touring act, the kind of band who plays maybe once a year, and they need that separation between shows to be able to sell enough tickets to fill the room. Um, because outside of some exceptions, most artists, at least touring artists, can't draw significantly uh, too close together. If they play too often, once a month, people are just gonna feel like I already saw them. I'm gonna go to a movie that night. Um, our rule of thumb and what we have in our offers is simply if we book a show, we have an artist coming up 3 to 6 months from now, we just ask that they don't play the market between now and the ticketed show with the guarantee that we have. Except for special occasions and underplay, for example, an artist who's much bigger than your room, who's doing a small show, we're not really worried about those. But most of the time, that's the rule. As far as after the show, I don't really care. Uh, our rule is simply announce whatever you do after the day after our show. Some people are stricter. They have a 3 month, 90 days after the show, you can't play. I don't know why anyone would radius out an artist playing the day after. It doesn't hurt our show if you play the week after our show, as long as no one is promoting it on top of our show that we have to sell tickets for. It's more of a hindrance to your second show if you play too soon. As far as the radius statewide. Again, ours is really just Austin or San Antonio or wherever and the surrounding suburbs and small towns. So we don't want someone playing here and then playing 20 miles away on a cheaper ticket and splitting the audience in half and losing money. So ours is usually about a 100-mile radius, but around whatever city we have you in. Some folks will radius out San Antonio, for example, and vice versa. We don't do that. I think that's such a different market. It's not like Dallas Fort Worth where they're really, really close together and it's pulling from the same crowd. So ours is a bit looser than some. I have heard about stricter radius clauses, particularly around festivals. I remember Lollapalooza at one point getting sued because of it, because they had radiused out all the way down to St. Louis, Missouri. I mean, they were taking over entire states, and then they were doing full years of radiuses. So like local venues couldn't book an artist for 12 months even if they weren't in Chicago, but were in surrounding states. So they had to shrink it down after, lawyers got involved, because it was clearly like a way to buy the market. So yeah, there's extremes like that will be met with pushback. And then there's reasonable requests that most artists, if they're smart and their management and their label know what they're doing, they don't want them to overplay a market anyway. Again, there are certain artists who play once a week or once a month or have residencies. That's a very different thing. But for larger scale touring artists, typically the radius is pretty simple. It's just a way to make sure that their fans will go see them because that's the show happening within a certain amount of time in an area. And then, the next show has enough breathing room to make it significant and exciting for people to want to pay to go see them.
Yeah. And Denise, do you have any insights in terms of what markets might kind of box one another out within Tennessee? I mean, Graham mentioned Dallas Fort Worth versus Austin and San Antonio. Do you have a sense of the landscape in Tennessee?
We don't have any large cities that are kind of clustered like that.
Hmm.
We're pretty spread out, Memphis, Knoxville, Nashville. Um, so not really. I guess the only thing I would say is Nashville has a uniqueness in that we have a lot of songwriters who are also artists and a lot of writers rounds, many of which are the artists or the songwriters doing for free. So you just want to be aware of and know whether your radius clause, you can carve that out. If they're playing the Bluebird on Tuesday night and they got a gig at the Ryman on Friday night, is that going to be a problem? So, because the Bluebird would be a writer's round versus a full band gig. So I think those things have to come into play. Um, Other kinds of things that I think just carve out in general are radio show appearances, unannounced guest appearances, showcases for things like country radio seminar. Those kinds of things you carve out of your radius clauses anyways.
Hmm. Okay, super helpful. And then Brendon, since your roster includes some developing artists, I imagine that you might want to play, several times within a certain radius. How does that affect routing and exposure for your talent?
Yeah, it comes down to me. I mean, I kind of look at these things mentally as how big's your center of gravity, truly? Like, Morgan Wallen's on the label. Like he's going to get hit with some pretty major radius discussions. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Let's do 3 dates in Foxborough, and maybe let's not go near Boston again for a little while. He's got a massive center of gravity. But
Hmm.
I look at the drop tines, or even a more developing artist like a Coleman Jennings on our roster. Like their center of gravities are relatively small. So if they can build this audience by seeing them a whole bunch in markets that are relatively close to one another, I'm okay with that. And I'll be the one in the conversation saying so. I think for very good reasons, agents and show buyers, respectfully, Graham, like I think I think that perspective is absolutely one to hear out. And the question there to a Graham, if drop times were going to play Mohawk, for example, or Central Machine Works like they've done recently, is like, hey man, what's in your head about announcing afterwards?
Sure.
How far out are you thinking? And it can be as unofficial as that. I mean, let's just be honest about how we're trying to promote this show. And like, if next day is okay, and they're going to play in Antone's in 3 weeks, like,
Sure.
no big deal. But let's just make sure we're on the same page about how we're cross promoting these things, and let's not do that. So, just depending on the artist's center of gravity, and the developing artist has a smaller center of gravity than a you know, much, much bigger artist. George Strait comes to Texas, and he is a giant vacuum that pulls people in from all over the place to go play at a major stadium. They have to give that time to cool off and let people go back to their homes and spend some time not thinking about George for a minute before he goes to another center in Texas. And that, there might be a year in between that or two. So
Hmm.
it has to do with their center of gravity to me. And then an honest, like, adult conversation between buyers, agents, and anyone else in the conversation about what we're all trying to get out of this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
sorry.
sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd pair with that genre has something to do with it to a degree. As Brendan said, center of gravity is really just it's funny. It's almost like two opposites. If you're really big, really popular, you don't want to play as often. It kills your audience. You only have X amount of people of this large venue that have to fill it, and you don't want to split them in half by playing twice within the same period of time. Or if you're really small and your draw is almost irrelevant to, the show's success, like a band's following is kind of a guaranteed. They'll come see them once a week. They have kind of a built-in small fan base. It's kind of everything in the middle that's questionable.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think genre often plays a part for some reason. If I'm booking an indie rock band from New York that tours every 2 years, or a punk band from Japan, those bands, they have 1,000 fans. You're hoping 70% of them show up. If they play twice within the same month, 350 will go to one, 350 will go to another of that 70%, and you can't pay them as much as you could on one single show. But there are a lot of artists, particularly in the kind of Nashville music scene and some of the Texas music scene, country, blues, soul, R&B, who play weekly. They do residencies. They come through once a month. Their audience is really there to have fun. It's not so much they bought a ticket to see them. They got a babysitter. They took the day off work. The next day, they're going to go have fun, and they're not going out for another year. These are the type of folks who they go out every weekend to see music and dance, and this is the band they like to see and to entertain them for the night. So it's interesting. Like there are certain artists who I see pull it off, and then a lot of artists that don't.
Hmm.
I was just going to add the radius clause. It's really it's to protect the promoter's investment because they're making an investment in the artist, but doing so without prohibiting the artist the ability to earn a living. So that's that center of gravity balancing act that they're talking about.
And usually managers, labels, folks like that are going to help guide the right type of artist as they get bigger and they want to hold back and say, you don't want to overplay the market. They know what they're doing, that they don't want to overplay either. There was a hip hop act we used to book back in the day, and he lost his agent. And then this new middleman agent slash manager person was working, and I swear he was running him through every 3 months, 4 months, anyone who would pay the fee, they'd play Austin. And now no one, I mean, it's irrelevant if he plays. Like no one goes because it's like, oh, that guy, he plays all the time to nobody. Where he used to be a huge deal. He used to sell 1,000 tickets. Now maybe 200 if he's lucky, because he just became what felt like a smaller local band, even though he was a legend from New York who was flying out to play the market. So
That
yeah,
is the difference between experience, inexperience, and a short-sighted cash grab.
totally.
That's it. 100%, man.
Question from the audience on radius clauses. How would you convince venues of this gravity to circumvent radius clause? You kind of mentioned like there's a relationship piece of this, right? Where you can say, hey, this is really what we're striving for. Can you make an exception? Are there any other tips or suggestions on how you might manage that?
I mean, I personally, I'll just jump in. Like, I really personally love dealing with experienced booking people at clubs. If there's an in-house buyer or agents who've been doing this for a long time, because you can just have that conversation. You can pull up, and if you're unclear about the artist you're talking about, just pull up some recent Polestar numbers and some, you know, geo-targeted data on Spotify even, and just go, hey, look, we're not seeing major impact in this market. I don't think we're oversaturating by playing 2 or 3 times in a quarter even for this guy. That goes back to Graham's point about a residency. Like
Mm.
I'll mention Coleman Jennings again. Like I don't have any problem with him at this point in his career playing a residency at, let's say, Sagebrush in Austin. It's fine. You know, he's only building at that point. He's not taken away from a venue's power to sell in the future or anything like that. He builds up to a point where we all, as experienced people in the decision making triangle, need to go, all right, we need to take a break here. He doesn't need to play so often. He's doing great. Let's create some scarcity here. And then we'll talk about a show. Then we're talking a ticketed show for a larger venue that he controls some of the leverage on. You know, we start talking about ticket splits at that point. That's a totally different conversation.
For sure. Yeah, timing is everything. The biggest like new band out of Austin right now is this band called Die Spitz. That's like a punk rock and roll band. They used to play 3 times a week. Like every night of the week they were playing, and it was hard to book them on touring shows because it was like, are y'all playing Friday too tomorrow? But we have you tonight with the so and so. Like, is anyone going to show up? They were consistently drawing. They got really popular, got a new manager, and now they've really honed their skill and built such a strong audience, because playing a lot in the beginning is key. Radius is irrelevant for a small local band. And now they barely ever play except really key shows, and they headlined one of the bigger venues here in town recently for their record release. So yeah, when you're starting out, I think playing a lot is the goal. And at some point, the radius, I think, for both the promoter and on the artist side is really about protecting a band. When do they get to that point where their audience is key, and that audience is frugal in terms of their love for the band, but their ability to spend more on a higher ticket. So yeah, I mean, like the radius kind of benefits everyone, but it's got to be reasonable. So anyway.
There's one more point on the music side, because I could stay on the money side and ticket side all day because I'm fascinated by it. But also playing a lot when you're that age makes you a better band, by the way. So I'd rather work with a band that's played 1,000 shows at a certain point because
Mm.
they've gotten better, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
So
there's a lot of residency rooms in Austin. I mean, Nashville's filled with them, but like
yeah,
Boy is here. It's just this little residency room. Sagebrush is starting to do them, he mentioned. Um, but yeah, I mean, Boy is like Leon Bridges, Black Pumas, all those bands did a weekly there, and now they're all huge. Like I think the
yeah.
residency and the that stuff's fine. I think very rarely do promoters like myself, put a lot of emphasis on that kind of stuff. I think it's usually for the bigger artists, the touring artists, that you want to make sure they're not oversaturating the market and kind of hurting themselves because you're the one taking the risk to pay them, and you want to make sure you can sell enough tickets to do just that. So.
Speaking of selling tickets, so Graham, could you speak to us a little bit about how the venue is benefiting from bringing the tour into its space and what the ticketing splits usually look like?
Sure, sure. If you mean the show itself, the venue, most venues, whether it's a little dive bar or a huge, amphitheater, m m- most will say the bulk of their money is F&B, food and beverage, mostly beverage. So your beer sales, your bar sales are kind of everything.
Mhm.
Um, you make enough off the door if you're lucky to cover your sound and staff and marketing materials. Uh, and then the rest is the artist guarantee. If it's a door split, which there's less risk for the promoter or the venue, um, there should be more upside for the artist where the split is in the artist's favor. So if the door does really well, the artist makes more money. More often than not, we deal with bands who need guarantees. They're touring, they've got a lot of costs. They want to make sure they can make X amount per night. In which case the budget itself is sort of a risky endeavor, but that's what the promoter's doing. You're the bank, you're taking a risk on every show you do. So we're saying the band costs X amount, the club costs are this much, marketing, ticketing, BMI, licensing, all that stuff, insurance, all goes into one total budget. And you don't get paid till the very end,
Mm.
if the show breaks even. So you're like, okay, we need 722 people to break even. After that, there's promoter profit that's baked in that you get at the very end. And then the bar or the venue itself is making money as long as costs are covered, and the bar is selling drinks. And if you book a really young artist, for example, with a young audience, they don't drink as much uh, at all if they're under 21. So you got to factor that in as well. But yeah, that's essentially where the money's being made. There's little things. There's some venues take merch. Most of the venues we work with don't. Um, some venues have a ticketing fee, so like a buck a ticket or $2 on top when you buy a $20 ticket at checkout, it's $24. Some of that's going to the ticket company. Some of it covers facility fee costs for the venue in terms of staff and rent and things like that. But the bulk of everything comes from just ticket sales, and then what's left is usually based on your food and bev.
Brendon, you mentioned that you're fascinated by ticketing, and it's a whole other conversation, but do you have anything to tack on, whether it be from kind of like a policy standpoint or even from a consumer standpoint, whatever is fascinating you at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I'm partly fascinated because I worked in ticketing. The company that I had before I went to work for the governor was ticketing, and we worked with venues in Texas like Billy Bob's and others. Transparency in ticketing has always been something that has been a really hot button, and I think if you look at a black box and you see something, hopefully from the designated seller of a ticket. Okay, first of all, and you're like, oh great, I can afford $150 to see this artist. That's a lot of money, but I think I can. And then you get excited and you go through and you click through, and all of a sudden it's $220, and you don't know where any of that's going. And all of a sudden you've created this sort of negative perception about the artist somehow. And then
Mm.
ticketing has played this psychological role in guiding your experience before you even got to the venue. So, there's one side of it that I'm fascinated by. We've seen a lot of Department of Justice conversations, if you want to call them that, around what ticketing in the United States needs to look like and maybe will look like in the future. And I'd say I'm not an overly cynical person. I think it's trending in the right direction. It's not getting there very fast, but it's trending in the correct direction. Transparent ticketing, a better understanding that if you're going to go purchase a ticket from the venue, then that's where you need to go to purchase it. Don't rely on third parties. Don't rely on speculative ticketing. You're essentially in the United States, how it ought to work is you should be forming a contract with the artist and the buyer that is putting the show on, and that is a very simple agreement in my mind, and somehow we've gotten away from that in a pretty perilous way. And we're trying to right the ship. The system is trying to right itself a little bit. Uh, I for artists, if I'm ever asked, I be true to who you are, and be true to the relationship you have with your fans when you're talking with your tour promoter about how you're going to price these things. We don't all have to be Garth Brooks and charge $20. That's that's very benevolent, but let's try to do things that are responsible, and you may want to see these people again. So why don't we price things in an appropriate way, and let's be fair about ticketing, and let's always remember as consumers that we need to buy directly from the
Mhm.
people that have the right to sell these things to you.
Interesting,
Yeah.
though, a lot of the promoters like Ticketmaster and AXS, not all of those, own their own secondaries now. And so, yeah, it's kind of, but at least from the management artist side of the equation, if it was a third-party secondary ticket seller that's reselling the tickets at a much higher price, the artist is not participating in any of
That's
that
correct.
profit. So it if you are an artist who has the market equity to negotiate a piece of that secondary market, and it's going through the primary ticket seller, I don't know. It just there's something about it that still bugs me, but I guess that's better than the alternative. Lesser of two evils, maybe.
Yeah.
It's a big can of worms. I mean,
Yeah.
just
I mean, I
giant.
feel like we could spend an hour on ticketing alone. I have spent hours on it. I've been to Washington to talk to senators and congresspeople about it with the NEVA organization. Yeah, as Brendon said, there's a lot going on right now. I too am kind of cynical. I'm like, I'm hopeful they make some changes. It's hard to, it feels like you're pushing a boulder up the hill, but Brendon's also worked, in the governor's office. We've also seen positive change in music at a political level. So I'm hopeful. A lot more has happened than I thought. I've been interviewed by so many district attorneys and people at a national level over the years. I never thought anything I said off the record would ever make its way to something. And now there's actually conversations happening about breaking up, monopolies that are controlling ticketing and venues, actually stepping in with secondary ticketing companies and regulating that. Like all these things that people have been saying for a while are unfair practices are finally being addressed. I'm hopeful something happens. For those who don't know, the short of it is you've got a few problems in ticketing. They're complicated, but you've got ticketing itself and pricing. Brendon was talking about transparency, meaning you buy a $30 ticket and at checkout, all of a sudden it's $47.22. You're like, how did $17 show up? Because there's so many added sneaky fees that promoters and ticketing companies are adding. So nationally, they started an all-in pricing model that's legal now. Like you cannot now ticket something and have fees added and it say at the bottom, fees included at checkout. You have to show your all-in price. I think that helps at like a larger scale when you've got the Taylorgate drama with Taylor Swift and the $1,000 tickets that brought this up to the government, a year or two ago, and it became a big issue. Those are such extreme scenarios where I think that was made more sense. On 90% of the tickets sold in the country, that those fees are a lot smaller, so it's negligible. You're talking like again a $30 ticket with $5 in fees. Um, so the all-in pricing helps a little, but I think the bigger conversation is the total price itself and how all these fees are ending up there, why artists don't have say. The fact that artists can say, I want my fans to pay $50. I don't want to pay more than $50. VIP 100. And yet the ticketing company takes it, the promoter, the venue, and then scales it in whatever way they want. As Denise said, some of the bigger companies actually own and have investment partnerships with some of the secondary markets, which is the legal scalping, StubHub, SeatGeek, things like that. Or they have deals with them where they take 20% of their inventory. They have a 10,000 cap room, 2,000 of it, the best seats in the house, get put on the open market, they get a cut of all the profits and then they upsell them. So the promoter or the giant venue can say, well, we're not scalping tickets. This other company is. We're just giving them 2,000 tickets and they're scalping them and they're giving us all the rest and we're pocketing it. And to be honest, there are some agents at the top and bands who are benefiting from that, who do know about this process, have made that deal and said, I know a promoter who owns some huge venues in Minneapolis, and they switched to the dynamic pricing model, which I can speak to, but dynamic pricing is this bot essentially that follows you as the buyer. As you go to click on a ticket that's $80, the more people click on that $80 ticket, the bot moves it up to 100, 110, 120, 240, 280 until people stop buying and it slows down and then it starts dropping it until the purchasers keep buying throughout the weeks and it just drops and raises it based on what you're willing to pay, which is insane. Can you imagine pumping your gas and they just starts changing as you're pumping? Like, so you slow down, it drops the price. You start pumping, it picks it back up. Like no other world does this. This does not happen in economically in America except for here.
Airlines and hotels.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
would
But
argue.
at least then, it's happening before. Uh,
It's
it takes a little time to do it. Here,
Not
it's happening
instantaneous.
as you're clicking. Like literally, if thousands of people are trying to buy Green Day tickets, it can just skyrocket until people stop buying the tickets. It's crazy. And there's so much money being made. The promoter I was saying that I work with is an indie, but has some big venues. And a couple of agents were like, if you don't add a dynamic pricing model and switch your ticketing company that has that dynamic pricing, I have to only work with Live Nation because they have Ticketmaster, which does dynamic pricing. And we love that extra 10 or 20 grand at the end of the day. We can't say no to that. And I get it from an artist perspective. They're trying to fund their tour, but they're doing it at the behest of, I mean, really, it's their fans' money. So it's just, and it trickles down. Like no one will say it or they don't talk about it enough, I don't feel, but like, I feel like dynamic pricing is almost worse than third party scalping, than promoters taking advantage, which I hate as well. But if people who used to pay $80 to see a big concert are now paying $300, and that's just what they think tickets cost, they may not go to the next three shows they were going to go to. They
Right.
may not eat out at that restaurant across the street from the amphitheater that they usually eat at because they just spent $300, $600 for a pair of tickets. They're not gonna go have a drink at the bar down the street. They're not gonna. They're from out of town. They were gonna stay in that hotel. They're just driving 3 hours back to Dallas because they can't afford to stay the night at a hotel. They just spent, an entire week's pay to see Weezer or whoever. Like it's insane that
Mm.
this exists and it's not regulated. There's no cap. The same way that third party and or secondary market ticketing isn't capped. I don't even mind that there's a SeatGeek or a StubHub out there. If they took the ticket price, your $50 ticket, and weren't allowed to add more than 10%
Hmm.
their time and their effort and their marketing resources, they spend billions of dollars a year marketing to the world. When you Google, you know, Tyler Childers, the first 10 things that show up are not the ticketing website for the venue
Right.
or for his website. They are all paid by secondary markets who are buying up the market and selling them at triple, quadruple what you would have paid. And you still can pay directly with the venue, but you don't know that because most people don't go out that often. Most people don't go out once a week. They're out once a year. So,
Mm.
I mean, if you don't know any better, why would you? The first time I ever experienced it was we had an artist from Mexico. He's huge in Mexico, play at a small, like 1,000 cap venue in Mohawk. This woman shows up. She had paid 200 something bucks for a ticket. There were still tickets for sale at the door for $30.
Mm.
And she didn't speak great English. And she was dressed real nice. You could tell to her $250 wasn't the craziest thing in the world. And this band's huge in Mexico. So for her, it was like, yeah, $250 to see the biggest band in Mexico play in 1,000 cap room. Of course I'll pay $250. But she was annoyed because she's like, why is it $30 at the door? I just paid $250. I don't mind because I'm seeing them do an underplay. They just aren't that big in America. So they were playing the right size room. But she didn't know any better. Why would she? She's going online, she's searching the band. It makes sense to her because they're big somewhere else. You don't question it or search any deeper or scroll down and find a better ticket link to find a cheaper ticket. Anyway, sorry. I said I could talk for an hour. I could talk for 1,000 on this. It drives me.
Well, it's all interconnected, right? So this is super helpful because you mentioned in some instances with the secondary market, the artist isn't benefiting with the dynamic pricing they might be. And you mentioned, that might help fund the tour. And I guess, Denise, do you have any insights into tour sponsorships and what that might look like for folks on the call who might be seeking something like that or who might be working on a deal that is for a sponsorship for an artist?
Sure. First of all, a sponsor, it, they want something out of it too. So you've got to have some market equity and you got to matter. You got to be bringing some people to them in the same way that getting the money from a sponsor helps underwrite your touring cost. They're not going to just do it out of the goodness of their heart. So that's kind of the first thing is you got to have some value that you're bringing to the table as an artist to get a sponsor. When you have a sponsor, you have to be protective of that relationship with that sponsor. If it's not unusual for amphitheaters and you know, Bridgestone type arena venues to have their own sponsors. And so you as a manager have to be mindful of, is this conflict directly with my artist sponsor? One's sponsored by Ford and one's sponsored by Toyota. You got to look at that. And in situations where, if a amphitheater has a year-long sponsorship with a Ford truck dealership and I've seen this, Ford trucks displayed on the lawn, and you're coming in there with a full-on Toyota sponsorship, then you got to figure out something. And the compromise has been, as weird as this might be, tarping those trucks. So we would tarp the trucks for the show, and we would not allow any signage from the stage facing outward with Ford on it. But then all over the rest of the venue, there is Ford signage. So it's just, you have to be, I guess, the less from the legal, more from the manager perspective. You just got to be watching that because you got to protect that sponsorship.
Okay, so we're down to the last couple minutes already. If anyone in the audience has questions, please drop them in the chat so we can address those. I want to ask the panel two questions. One is about whether you're seeing an increase in requests as it relates to streaming live content from your shows. And the second is if you have any pros and cons for acts performing in either Austin or Nashville. Those pros and cons can be about culture, audience, rules and regulations, noise ordinances, whatever it might be. So first question about streaming content, and then second is how do you pitch Nashville or Austin? What are the pros and cons? Feel free to jump in.
I'll jump in.
Yeah.
And then because I think I've got they probably have more to share than I do. The the streaming of and recording of live events involves copyright. And so you're talking about a copyright of an underlying musical composition and the copyright of a sound recording. And you have to, as a venue that may be doing that, or a third party entity doing that on behalf of a venue, you have to have the rights. I was at a show, funny enough, in New Braunfels. This has been probably 10 years ago at a small venue, and they were doing a Nashville style writers round. And I was working with a Red Dirt artist and was there really to go see family and then go see him. But there was a Nashville songwriter slash artist, up and coming artist on there. And the people trying to record, they wanted to record, they wanted to live stream. They wanted to live stream, they wanted to record that, and then they wanted to sell those recordings, audio video recordings, and they were luckily I didn't have to mess with it, but the bigger songwriter, artists, publisher, and manager were on the phone with that night at the venue going, no, he's not going on. He's until you just will accept that you cannot record and sell this.
Mm-hmm.
So those are copyrights. So who owns the copyright has to be the center question.
Yeah. Um, okay, 1 minute left. So maybe pros and cons of artists performing in Austin and or Nashville to close us out.
I have all pros for both.
Yeah.
I got to say, there's a very, very cousin or sister city element that Nashville and Austin share in particular. I think Nashville and Texas as a whole more broadly, but no, man, if you're playing music that is resonating with people, you got great rooms on both ends of that highway to play, man. I mean, if go go do it. And I always tell artists, I always tell writers who are based in Texas and may have some sort of chip on their shoulder about this or that. Like Nashville's not what you think it is. It is the place where you can go laser focus your songwriting. It's a place where you can go laser focus your relationships. It's a place where you can help build the business that you've started wherever you are. And if that's Texas, if that's what we're talking about, build your small business where you feel at home and then go make real professional relationships in a place like Nashville, especially if you're a songwriter or you're participating in anything remotely connected with neo folk, Americana songwriters, Texas country, commercial country. That's where 90+% of your relationships are working at a really, really high level. So go there and don't go there as a gift to them. Go there as a person who's willing to learn and willing to be a
Mm.
part of a community that can be incredibly supportive of you. So just do it with an open heart. Go be a part of it. Incredible rooms on both ends of that highway. It's a very, very natural connection that I personally loved and enjoyed working in for 30 years now. I can't I can't see Texas without Nashville, and honestly, vice versa.
Lovely. Graham, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I'd say pros, probably for both cities. I've only been to Nashville once, but very similar to Austin in that there's a lot of venues and a huge music scene. So both are places where artists can perform to a lot of people. Music is part of the culture. At least for Austin, there's not a national sports team, for example. So people tend to treat music like their hobby, their sports team, their thing you do on the weekend. So it's a great place to perform. As far as um yeah, as far as negatives, I would just say, I don't know if people are still on or not, but
Yeah, we're here.
okay. The negatives I would just say because of that they are very saturated markets. So during the busy
Mhm.
season, spring and fall, there are 10 shows, 15 shows a night of huge touring artists, in addition to the amazing local bands these cities have to offer. And often you're competing with yourself. Like how do you choose what to go to? How do you choose what to do? And we have the luxury of riches or whatever you call it.
There you go. Well, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much. The hour flew by. There's so many more questions, so maybe we'll do a part two at some point down the road. But thank you to everybody who joined in the audience, and thank you so much to the panelists for providing your insights and experience. And thanks again to TALA and Nashville Arts and Business Council for making this happen.
Thank you all.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Have a wonderful day. Bye. Thank you.